So this is you. And what are you really? The answer is not much actually. And so before you click off because you're having an existential crisis, just hear this out for a moment, right? So there are many angles on how I can answer this question, but from a perhaps psychological perspective, you're based on two things. One is your emotions, and one is your not emotions, and otherwise your logical thinking, right? And the majority of your emotions, including some of your logical thinking processes, comes from your reptilian brain, right? And so if you are a huge fan of biology, you can perhaps elaborate specifically on the reptilian brain. But if I'm not mistaken, it's that little area behind your brain, behind bottom of your brain. And so this reptilian brain has a primary function, which is survival. And if you actually think about it, it has done until now quite a good job, right? Because for millions and millions of years, our ancestors and generations of you before have managed to survive until now, right? And including the complexities of survival throughout nature, including food scarcities, hygiene, war, natural disasters, you were able to survive until now, right? Thanks to your basically your grandparents and your generations beforehand. And so the question comes to you now is what is your purpose, right? Because if you think about it quite logically in today's world, your brain obviously is hardwired to survive, but if you think about it, your purpose in life is not essentially to survive, right? Like think quite logically about it. And so there's an issue because you're fundamentally hardwired to survive, but you're having an existential crisis because you're unable to find your purpose. And that's mainly intertwined or interconnected because your brain is saying survive, but you are basically surviving. And so what you're looking for is essentially a higher purpose, right? And if you want to know specifically what is the higher purpose, I've made a separate video on this. But the higher purpose, to talk about philosophy a little bit, I'll talk about Maslow's hierarchy, right? I mean, you've probably heard about this hierarchy before, but it's basically a triangle with the top being, your higher self, transcendence, or the purpose, and below, like all the layers below, include stuff like biological imperatives, self-esteem, family, stability, emotional connections, etc., etc., right? And so let's go back. Where on earth is my eraser? Let's go back on the primary question of this video. What is your purpose? And so for me personally, I haven't found it, right, per se, because your purpose is something complex, right? And so if we talk about Maslow's hierarchy beforehand, your purpose essentially is a higher good, right? Or a higher serving. Let's just call it higher serving. And for a lot of people, it fundamentally means your contribution to society, how you serve society. For the religious people, is how you serve God. And it's essentially all the same thing, right? But if we want to start at a very basic level, a level, basically the same, your primary purpose in today's world is to make money, literally. Because if you can't make money, you basically can't survive, right? And so now you understand how it's basically interconnected. And so the economy, in other words, the attention economy, has designed itself in such a way that you basically need money to survive. And without money, if we go back to the Maslow's hierarchy, a lot of these layers will basically be not satisfied. And so, with that being said, let's focus on money for a moment. Because money is nothing more than an exchange of value, right? It's basically, if you're doing economics, you've heard of this term many, many times, but it's nothing more than paper but what's underlying is the idea of value, right? And so money is basically nothing more but then a reflection of a specific value on a specific item, right? And that can be abstracted into many different ways, but for the purpose and the sake of this video, we're going to basically keep it very, very simple. And so if your primary objective is money, the next logical step is to make money, right? And so you have nothing more, and literally nothing more than two options. Either you can work for money, so you search a job 9 to 5, basically the majority of human population, or you can start a business. And heck, you can even do both. You can even do one and later do another. But when it comes to the bipolar decisions, you only have two options really. So it's work and business. And so if you are having an existential crisis and you don't understand your purpose, right, at least from a philosophical or psychological perspective, at least focus on the financial perspective. Because I can almost guarantee you that if you focus on this area of money and you start either working or starting a business, you will slowly do something which is uncovering your purpose. And this is what's fun, because that's what I did. That's what I did. I started off playing professional football, right? Because not really about making money, but when I became professional and the money came to it, then I kind of discovered my real purpose, right? And so basically what happened was for me is that when I started focusing on money, I didn't want to play football anymore, because I was basically looking for something different, and hence why I'm more interested in the work 9 to 5, or in other words, a business, right? Rather than playing football. And yes, you can argue for the footballers out there, it's basically, the same thing. Playing football is like working, but you get the point, right? And so what I am not saying is, I'm not saying that money is the end purpose, and it's not. It's not fundamentally speaking according to Maslow's hierarchy. It's not fundamentally speaking according to religions and other philosophies. Money is a very basic layer, what I'm describing to you, on how to at least eliminate a very simple layer of you having an existential crisis. And so again, if you're depressed, lost, or anxious about your purpose or future, at least focus on something that you can, and that's money, right? There are other people who focus on different areas of their life, for example, having a good relationship with your family, finding a girlfriend, or, like all the other sorts of things, and they're all fine, right? But I can tell you one thing for sure, if you sort out money, it's much more easier to sort out other issues you have in your life. For example, a bad relationship to your siblings or family, or you being lonely because you don't have a girlfriend. So if you sort out this first layer, I can almost guarantee you that other areas become easier. And so for now, for the sake of this video, to answer your question, who am I? What is your purpose? I don't know. That's the truth. I don't know. But what I do know is that money is one driving factor of your existence. It's one of your purpose. Your purpose is complex. It's a list of ingredients and formulas, and money is one of them. Money is a big one. And so settle this first, and I'll make another video on how you can settle the others. That will be it.